last year. Tonight, I'm asking for your full, undivided attention as we close the case on the structure being put in place to fundamentally transform America. This is the last critical piece of the puzzle that you need to understand. And you need to understand why it's being done and how they're doing it. But first, let me share some really good news with you. I don't know if you've heard it yet, but President Obama has finally capitulated. He's decided to fulfill his campaign promise he gave clearly at least 8 times to put the health care debate and all the negotiations on C-SPAN. Due to mounting pressure, Obama announced today that he will open up the health care debate to the American public and broadcast the congressional proceedings on the bill on C-SPAN for 1 full hour. I'd call that an infomercial. That should be plenty of time to fill in the citizens of this country on every detail of the 2,500-page bill, don't you think? By the way, only the bill that will fundamentally transform our republic. Don't say this president doesn't listen to the little people. Buckle up, gang, and get ready for an important hour that will help you understand what, why, and how the progressives in power are changing the structure of our nation. I want to start with a kind of a personal note. By the way, hello, America. I don't know if I've ever told you why I believe some of the things that I do, or how I began my journey into believing what I do. It's funny that the Uber left tries to discredit me by calling me a conspiracy theorist, because I've always made fun of conspiracy people. But sometimes there are conspiracies, and sometimes it's just plain out in the open, and you just have to be willing to look at it. Conspiracies aren't conspiracies when they're true and open. We have been closing the case this week on all of the things that we talked about last year, because we have to move on. We can't still sit here and say, gee, I wonder if this is what they're doing. We have to move to the position of what are we going to do about it now? And that's where we start next week. More and more Americans are finding themselves where I am, in a place where you don't want to believe the stuff that you now do, even the stuff that you would have thought a year ago was crazy town. But you do believe it because you're honest with yourself. You have promised yourself, as I have, to seek the truth no matter how many times you think about it, no matter how many times you think, oh my gosh, what does this mean to my future or the future to my children? If it makes me a pariah, so be it. It is the truth, not stuff I want to believe. But everything is in jeopardy. Our children's future is at stake. Do you believe that your children will be better off if things continue this way, that they will be better off than you are? For the first time in my life, I do not. Quite honestly, every president has said it. Our founders said it. America is the world's last and greatest hope. You don't really have a choice but to deal with the facts as you find them if you want to stand as a guardian of freedom. And if you find those facts and you don't like them, oh well, so be it. They're the facts. My daughter came to me about 2 years ago. I have always been kind of a, USA, USA kind of guy. I love this country. I love the founders. And I tried to instill those values in my kids. Well, when she decided she was going to go to college and she wanted to study ancient history, I said, what? She said, Dad, I want to study history. I'd like to be Indiana Jones without the scary spiders and the whips. And I said, well, why don't you major in American history? She looked at me, and this was like an arrow through my heart. She said, Dad, I can't. She said, I don't think you really know American history. She said, every time I get into it, it seems like the bad guys show up, and then they win. I was brokenhearted. My daughter believed the lies that were being taught. I told her I was going to prove her wrong. She had been indoctrinated. Well, a couple of years later, and many, many, many books and papers and conversations with esteemed professors later, I discovered that she was more right than I cared to believe. The founding of this country was miraculous. The industrial age gets a little dicey. and then the progressive era, which has all but been erased from history, changed everything. What really opened my eyes was this book. I mean, does it look boring as snot or what? It was given to me by Robbie George. He's a professor at Princeton University. Very respected professor. I started finding out about early American progressivism, and he gave me this book. It's written by R.J. Pestrito, who's now a friend of mine. Woodrow Wilson and the Roots of Modern Liberalism. This is my son. He drew a little picture of me in the front. He's 5. Although it does have a striking resemblance to me, doesn't it? It is one of the most boring books you'll ever read. It is just eye-bleed boring. But I learned things about our nation and the progressive era that I prayed were not true. And I didn't go here. I went to all kinds of other books on progressives. And then I went to the progressive words themselves. And the more I read, the more sad I became, because I saw their influence. I saw what they set up. They started a 100-year time bomb. They planted it in the early 1900s, mainly with this guy, Woodrow Wilson. One evil SOB. Bad dude. But he wasn't alone. The Republicans had their guy as well, Teddy Roosevelt, a guy I thought I liked. I had a bust of Teddy Roosevelt in my house. I use it now as a doorstop. Only the real elite recognized what was going on. Earlier this week, I showed you that progressives, mainly led by FDR and Woodrow Wilson, learned how to use the media, centers of higher education, and then law schools starting in the 1920s to transform America slowly, because they tried to do it quickly and honestly and out in the open under Wilson, but it failed. You see, in the early 20th century, progressives were very popular under Teddy Roosevelt, and then in the early part with Woodrow Wilson. Until their policies really began to unveil themselves, the progressives were the...
This is at Fox News Channel. I've decided that we're going to interrupt Glenn Beck's program today to bring you this.